Hey everybody, Jay Schlansky here from the Fifth Trooper Network. I just want to take a moment to thank you for checking out this show. Did you know that over at thefifthtrooper.com we have tons of other content, including blogs, other podcasts, all kinds of stuff. In addition, if you want access to exclusive content, you can join us on patreon.com/thefifthtrooper and join at any level and you'll get access to exclusive blog articles, access to our private Discord, and much more. So please check us out, and thank you so much for all your support.
Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Mike.
Hey.
What's up?
Not much. It's Monday of the short 4th of July week. Hopefully it's short. We'll see. And we played some Legion over the weekend, which was great.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm doing good. How are you, Kyle?
Good. Yeah, we had a tournament on Saturday, local tournament at Dragon's Concord in Fairfax, Virginia, which is Northern Virginia, for those not familiar with the geography of the DC area. But yeah, you and all your capo buddies came down, most of them anyway.
We got a big group now.
Yeah,
it's pretty great.
Yep. And I drove up there. It's a reasonably close store to me compared to some of the other stores in this area. So I was very excited about that. And yeah, it was great. I brought EXD. No, sorry. I brought rad cannons, which is super off meta and hip and interesting.
Don't let them lie.
And yeah, it was part of EXD. But don't let that distract you from the fact that it was super hip and off meta and awesome.
There was nothing about it that was hip and off meta, Kyle.
Rad cannons, Mike, and Viper droids.
Rad cannons, like the heavies and the B1 squads, really matter.
Yeah, and Viper droids too.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
I would describe the heavy weapons that go on the B1, like the B1 configuration in that list, as like the cool spice you put on top of the dish. It's just like, it's flavorful, but it doesn't really affect how EXD actually plays on the table.
Sure it does, though. I mean, pad thai is a lot different than like drunken noodles.
They're both really good.
They're both great, but they're both very different from each other.
Sure.
I had drunken noodles today, which is why that's on the brain.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, it was super fun. I'm going to talk about my games. EXD is really good.
Breaking news.
Breaking news. I know that this is the first time that I had played them myself personally at a tournament and had the experience. And I felt similar to, do you remember back in like the Rexstar days when I had been like stubbornly not playing Rexstar and you had been playing Rexstar, and then this was for Invader League. Basically you made it to top, I think it was the final actually with Rexstar.
Yeah.
And I helped you prep for your game. And of course it was a Rexstar mirror. So I also played Rexstar. And when I did that, I was like, man, whatever else I was doing before, this is like getting off a moped and getting into a Ferrari.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I felt like putting EXD on the table for a tournament. It was just like, and I would, for the record, I was playing, fairly degenerate defensive tech clones before. So
yeah, it's surprising how good it is against everything.
Yeah, it's just like, it's so flexible. All the things click together perfectly. The super tactical droid cards are like a perfect supplement to everything that experimental droids always wants to do anyway. It's like everything, it just works together so well that it's amazing. And I can't say enough good things about it, except it's probably what I'm going to be playing until something changes.
Yeah, I sort of am consigned to that after playing Bad Batch this weekend. I think it's time to just throw in the towel and pick up the EXD flag, to be honest. It's weird because the list itself, I think, is actually like when you look at EXD on paper, it doesn't look like it should be the monster that it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's got a bunch of like mediocre to bad units in it,
And it
basically.
and it doesn't even really break the Force org, right? In fact, it takes the Separatist Force org and kind of like takes a worse version of it because and I say
Yeah,
worse because you're like normally you're not like taking extra special forces or supports or whatever like all of the other battle forces, right? You're still within the reasonable list. Like you could literally take an EXD battle force list and just take the same list um like without the battle force rules in
right.
theory,
Yeah.
right?
It's not like Blizzard Force where you're taking 4 bikes or something is what makes it,
Yeah.
supercharged.
Totally.
And
So it's just it's weird because you're like, okay, this list, if you literally strip the Battle Force rules and put this list in like an environment where it operates without that, it's actually like not very good.
yeah, it's
Right?
quite terrible actually.
Yeah. So like on paper, you're just like looking at this and you're like, how I don't know. So I'm glad you were able to kind of experience that firsthand. Because it's one of those things where I think as people that have played the game a ton, when people say things are overpowered and coming in red hot, like obviously this is a little bit of special circumstance. It's tough to believe how good it is until you actually play it.
Yeah.
Like it, everybody kind of like going on about it like seems a little hyperbolic until you put it on the table and you're like, oh, dang, all right, well, this thing goes from 0 to 70 in 2 seconds. So, you know,
Yeah, I ended up across my 3 games, there was one concession early, and then across the other 2 games, uh, I had a combined 3 units on the enemy side that survived.
across three
um,
games.
across 3 games.
Yeah.
Uh, my kill points were it was close. It might have been 1800 or more. It was close to whatever the like max. No, that's too low actually. It was close to like the max possible kill points. Um, and yeah, I mean, it just snowballs so quickly. Um, it's super flexible on the objectives, but even just the attrition killing power is
It almost doesn't need
so
to be
high.
flexible on the objectives, right? That's just like the icing on the cake. It's like, oh, if the game gets close, we can lean into this, right? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I think there's an interesting discussion around. I do want to talk about the rad cannons, and I want to talk about one of my games too because I do have a tactical topic to come out of this that has nothing to do with EXD,
Okay.
which we'll get to. But first, I want to talk about kind of like the various tweaks that you can kind of work around the EXD model with. I'm sure people are sick of us talking about this, but this is like
This is what Legion is right now at high level
it
competitive play.
is
Yeah.
unfortunately, and it's also more personal for me now that I've actually like done it at a tournament, and likely will continue to be doing it until otherwise
He's falling
forced
on his
forced to
sword,
stop.
guys. He's falling on his sword. He's playing it, so they nerf it. We've all heard this before.
I will also simply say that I'm going to insert a hobby justification in here.
Yeah, okay.
I love painting droids. I really like how my droid stuff looks. I think it looks really cool. Uh, and I'm glad that I can put it on the table and have it be really good. So, um, yeah, anyway, so there's a couple like decision points I think in EXD. The first is like which super tactical droid do you take? Uh, You're squinting like that's not really a choice.
Yeah, I don't think it's close, but I'm willing to entertain your argument. Go
So
ahead.
I'm guessing that you think that it's Kalani and it's not close.
I can't get their name straight. Whichever one has strategized to printed on its unit card, it's that one.
That's Kalani.
Yeah.
So the differences between the three real quick. There is Kalani, who has Strategize 2 instead of Strategize 1. He does not have Override at all.
Correct.
And then he has Sharpshooter 2. His ranged attack is usually not relevant anyway, but it's like black-white with lethal 1. And then his melee attack is bad. He is so the big benefit basically to Kalani is Strategize 2, obviously, which is great. He's 100. The opposite to him is Kraken. Kraken does not have Strategize 2. He has Strategize 1. He has Override 2, which is the range 2 version of Override. And his attacks are like significantly better. He has 4 red in melee, I think with lethal. It's not my
It
head.
is lethal.
It's the same as Chewie's.
Notably, he also carries the charge keyword, which makes it much easier to deliver that attack.
Right. His range attack is also pretty good too. It's got like native pierce and he has sharpshooter too.
It does, yes.
So Kalani basically, Kraken, you essentially downgrade Strategize 2 to Strategize 1, but you gain Override 2 and you gain significantly better attacks. Is kind of what you get with Kraken. And then for 10 points cheaper than both of them at 90, you get the quote unquote generic. He's still unique, but he's a generic super tactical droid, unnamed, and he still only has Strategize 1 and he has Override 1. So both of those are like respectively worse than Kraken or Kalani, but he has both of them at the same time. And he's cheaper. He's 10 points cheaper, which is
I would say I'm not. I think you may be mentioning this. Kraken does not have a direct AI unit, which is
that's correct.
Which is a huge deal.
That is big. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
Just for as long as we're pointing out differences.
No, that's important because essentially what it comes down to is like Kalani kind of leans into strategize and direct. Kraken leans more into override and like attack / offensive abilities, and then the generic has a little bit of everything from all of them. So I know some people like Kraken. The guy that I played first round, actually, Michael Stubbs, was saying how he liked to run EXD with Kraken just because he does like the Vibro Sword BXs, and it's
that doesn't surprise me. He's a very aggressive player.
Yeah, which we'll get to. This is our tactical topic that I have. Yeah. So thanks, Mike, for not you, Mike. I played for this upcoming tactical topic, but so I could see it if you play like an aggressive melee focused EXD, which I think you can do because I mean speed through moves, right?
It is a thing you can do. Yeah,
it's a thing you can do. Override also good for droidicas if you're using them. So, which if you're running like a bunch of sword BXs, you can use the droidicas to block line of sight. Anyway, it's a way you can do it. I think outside of that situation, I would not use Kraken. He's too specialized in that particular role, I think. Kalani clearly is the default choice because he leans super heavily into like that ranged, the extra strategize tokens are huge. I mean, it's really all about that extra strategize.
It 100% is. Kalani is strictly there to just juice your BX units.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, the kind of, I would say, optimized versions of EXD, the whole point of that list is to juice those BX commandos pretty much as much as you can.
Yeah. I think there is a case for the generic super tactical droid for two reasons. One, 10 points is a lot, and there's some like marginal EXD points list building decisions where getting an extra 10 points can really make a big difference, actually. For example, that's like usually an extra repair droid, right? A repair droid is 12 points.
Yep.
That gets you pretty close to just having like a straight up additional repair droid. If you want to run the version that has 4 repair droids in it, you pretty much have to use the generic super tactical droid. So that there's the 10 point savings, and then also just having override as like a hedge against comms jammers, which people have started taking to counter EXD, I think is pretty useful.
To me, that's really the only reason to take something other than Kalani, is that if people go heavy into the comms jammers and the comms jammers actually start doing their jobs, which I think may or may not end up being the case, override becomes a lot more important.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you don't have override and somebody comms jammers you, it's pretty genuinely bad. As an experimental droids player, it limits a lot of what you can do with your special surge mechanic. Um, the AI actions, particularly, I mean, AI attack on both the B1s and the B2s can be pretty devastatingly bad at the wrong moment. Um, and even like BX droids, I mean, BX droids are AI dodge move, but sometimes, particularly if you've got somebody in your face, you want to aim. Now, if you have offensive push up, obviously you can move and then aim in the process, but it can be, it can be bad, or especially if that is also like a melee focus list. That AI keyword prevents whatever unit you have from withdrawing. You have to do the AI thing instead. So,
Yeah. All the most of the guys that are like running vehicles around here was just started slapping comms jammer on everything.
uh-huh.
And it has reminded me how frustrating and degenerate that upgrade card
Yeah,
is. We haven't really seen a ton of it in the past like 3 years. Obviously, I'm pretty sure Ollie played it at Worlds.
yep.
But it is that card is so frustrating.
It's
It
it's
is.
it it's maximum negative play experience,
Yes,
basically.
it is not enjoyable and or fun to play with in any way. I mean, I suppose it's fun to play with, but not against.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah. I mean,
I
the whole concept is denial, right? Like whatever
yeah,
thing
yeah,
you were trying to do, whatever thing you wanted to do, you can't do it.
yeah.
It's like
And
change of plans on a different scale,
on
basically.
an upgrade card in every turn.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, I think that is the case for the generic super tactical droid. He gets you override as the comms jammer hedge, and he's 10 points cheaper. So
yeah,
I personally used Kalani. Strat S2 was amazing. I came up against comms jammers once, but by the time they were relevant, the attrition battle was very one-sided at that point. So um,
that's the problem. I think outside of perhaps the bus,
the bus, yeah,
all of the delivery mechanisms for comms jammers kind of get eaten by BX rates.
yeah,
Mostly spear banks or barks or flarecraft or whatever. You
yep,
can one shot most of those units with a BX pool on average.
yeah. That pool is addicting, by the way. It's like every time I rolled it,
Go on, tell
I
me
just wanted
more.
to cackle, It's just like just rub my hands together like a supervillain and be like, all right, I'm gonna roll 12 dice here. And I've got two aims.
The
Oh,
worst
and
the
Pierce
worst
too, and
part is
sharpshooter.
that there's so many white dice in it. It feels like it should always be worse than it is. Or like less good when I say worse. Like it always feels like you like overroll even though it's probably like an average or like a little bit.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? It's just like you're like there's just a bunch of white dice. They can't roll more than like two hits on the white dice, right? Like that's white dice. It's a Z6 kind of thing. It's just
right.
and then it's
Except they
always like four or five on the white dice because there's like 10 of them, you know.
right, and they surge,
Yeah,
and you usually are rerolling some of them because you
yeah,
have at least one extra aim that you don't have to spend on lethal typically. So yeah, it's like and sharpshooter, right?
yeah.
So there were times, I think Jason, who I played in the last round, there was a moment where I was like, "Oh, it's only 7 past cover." And he was like, "Oh, yay!" Like it had been like a comparatively uninspiring BX pool roll apparently, and I was like, "Oh, it's only 7." It's like, "Oh, 7 with Pierce. Okay, my unit still dies." Um, yeah. Anyway, so the rad cannons. I know I opened with the rad cannons, and it actually took me a while to get around to the rad cannons. I think so. There's the super tactical droid decision point. There is the what do you put on your B1 units decision point. I'd say the most popular upgrade is probably the sniper rifle thing, E5S.
Yeah.
That's certainly the most like universally useful one.
And it's also, I think, the best hedge.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that's going to be the least bad in the most matchups, if that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah.
You can ship at range 4. It uh, it has a critical 1, so you don't necessarily need to give your B1 surge tokens. Um, and it's a nice little, like, it's decent against armor. It's not going to be nearly as reliable as the rocket is, but of course the rocket exhausts and the sniper does not. So yeah, it's also the most expensive one. I guess it's the same price as the rocket.
It is.
Um,
Yeah.
but the rocket, obviously a much better direct hedge against armor, which is probably like, if there's a definitive EXD counter, it is armor.
Yes. Yeah. For
Um,
sure.
Particularly like aggressive armor, and even
Something
more
that
specifically
includes
buses.
buses. Yeah.
Buses, yeah. Um, and I don't know that the rockets actually like turn that into a serviceable matchup for you. um, they definitely don't against the, Brian Bear style double bus Luke list that's backed up by like repair 12 or whatever. It's more than that actually, because that has R2 in it, isn't it? It's like repair 16.
It's a
Uh,
lot. I mean, at the end of the day, it's one of those situations where like the only way you're gonna win those matchups is if you like kill everything other than the buses, or you just like start rolling like 12 die BX pools into the buses and coming up
with
crit.
a bunch of natty crits or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you just got to get lucky, you know.
Yeah, and I think in that situation, the Rockets, whether you have them or not, it's going to be
It's
it's kind of like sneezing into the wind, right?
yeah,
Like, um, it could make more of a difference against like Ollie's Shadow Collective bus list that doesn't have repair potentially,
for
uh,
sure.
especially if you have like impact grenades also on your BXs, which is another thing you can do. Um, I think if you're going like maximum armor hedge, you'd probably want to do the BX rockets, and then you do impact grenades on the sorry, impact grenades on the BXs and the B1 rockets.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
but I think default is to lean sniper rifle.
really, I am of the opinion that you just put rockets in EXD. I
Just
think
because you're going to kill everything else anyway, and if you run into a
yes,
problem, it's going to be with armor. Okay.
you don't need the snipers in those B1 squads, and the rocket is like, I mean, frankly, the rocket is better into infantry when you get to shoot it.
When you have a surge token, yeah, which you can give them with aggressive tactics.
Well, oh, because of critical. Sure, 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 sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I think I would say even without the surge token, it's probably pretty marginal.
it has better raw dice on it by a significant margin.
Yeah. Um, Obviously
The,
recovering is like a big thing, but
yeah,
you know, those B1 units are not the amount of work they need to put in is not high.
right. Yeah.
Um,
Um, yeah. So that brings me actually to option 3, which is the rad cannon. uh, I took the rad cannon because I wanted to be cool, and because it's 2 points cheaper than the other options, which is not nothing. Uh, I've talked about the rad cannon, I think, on previous episodes as potentially a clone commando edge. I don't know that it's like super necessary. I think I've concluded that EXD is advantaged in that situation regardless. I will say in the game where I faced clone commandos, it was good. I killed like 2 to 3 extra commandos that I wouldn't have killed otherwise without the poison tokens. Which, and you have no expectations of your B1. So the B1's killing 2 to 3 commandos by virtue of poison tokens is actually pretty significant, particularly as it gets around Katarn, right?
sure.
Um, and then also I faced Mandos, Shadow Collective Mandos, and they did pretty good work in that match as well. So if you're facing those things, I think it's actually pretty good. That the drawbacks of the rad cannon normally, which are obviously that it's range 2, that's the biggest one, and that you need to actually like do a wound to deliver the poison token. Um, those are things that experimental droids sort of uniquely can actually mitigate a little bit with the special rules in the battle force. The speed 3 move helps you get the range 2 shot easier, and then you can add extra dice to it to like power through an extra hit, which helps. So I found that it was actually more reliable at causing a wound than I thought it would be. Um, because of those two reasons. I don't know if I'd do it again. Uh,
Yep, that's uh, unexpected but not unwelcome.
I I think the biggest drawback of it, honestly, is that if you're in an experimental droid's mirror, which other than armor is probably the thing that you care about most, it does literally nothing for you because you can't poison droids. So
Yeah.
you might as well just be taking a range to E5C, basically. uh, so yeah, I think that's a long way of saying I don't know that I would do it again, but it definitely was more effective than I thought it would be. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it turns out, you can have your drunken noodles or your, pad thai, and you can choose whatever sauce on the side you want.
Yeah, and
It's
they're very tasty.
they're still pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then of course you got your B2s. I think most people take the HA there for multiple reasons. Cover denial, range 3 shot, and armor hedge. It is kind of noteworthy that it's like significantly more expensive than the ACM. I think there's a case to take the ACM. The ACM doesn't recover, it's got better dice. Of course, it does not deny cover, which is big, but it's always on. I don't know.
I could see the ACM being a thing that people start taking if Comms Jammer becomes more of a thing. But I think that is really the only reason in my book to do that. And just for those that maybe don't understand that, that's just so that you don't have to split your pool. When you're or like fire just the range 3 gun when you're AI attacking.
Yep.
Uh, so
Yeah.
obviously, if you're getting comms jammed, there's something at range 1 of you, but maybe you don't want to shoot at that specifically with your P2 unit. It can get awkward. I don't know.
It can.
So
Yeah, the minimum range on the HA coupled with a possible comms jammer can be a pretty brutal combination.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think that's probably the only reason not to take the HA. It's really nice to be able to add extra dice to a range 3 HA pool.
Yeah, and Blast
Here
is just so good.
it is.
Like it's worth the price you pay for it, the 8 points or whatever.
Yep. I also took the Viper droids in the B2s. I think most people I've seen take repair droids in the B2s if they're taking anything, or they just take them like without a personnel upgrade. You could also just go old fashioned and take a T series, but that unit gets pretty expensive, and it also loses AI, which means you can't use the Battle
Special
Force
rule.
special ability on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I took the Viper droids because they're only 6 points for an extra wound, and they also still have 2 dice at range 2. They were decent. I don't think I ever used Observe, but it was nice to have like a cheap extra wound there. I
I
think if you,
mean, it's strictly better than taking a name token if you're gonna take the aim action.
yeah,
But
I
but
don't think I ever had an opportunity for a B2 unit to like take an aim action. I was either
sure, yeah.
I was either like move shooting or recover shooting, basically. Um, so yes, it is strictly better than taking an aim because it's 2 rerolls on that target for anybody, whereas an aim, it's just 2 rerolls on the target for only the B2s. So
Just in
yeah,
case you want to juice your BXs some more.
I could see it if you want to just like, you know, if your HA is down and you don't have like a good target immediately in range, you move and then observe, and then you get to cycle the
The gun.
HA, and yeah. Yeah, there are use cases I could see for it. Those just didn't come up in my games for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So um yeah, and then you could, I've seen people take Decas. I think you could make the case for it. They're definitely better in EXD than they are normally. Um, their line of sight blockers, they're suppressive weapons. Suppressive is actually a pretty good keyword against clone commandos. Yeah, why the skeptical look?
I don't actually think that's true.
Why is that? Go on.
So I mean, I don't know if this is going to segue into where we're headed next, but my experience is that if you want to shove all your suppression into my clone commandos, by all means do it. I'm just gonna recover anyway. Like,
Well,
um,
but it's the difference between recover shoot and just the straight recover.
it is, but I don't know. I find that most of the time, once you get into like that stage of the game, you're only getting one action anyways. And if you want to shoot my commandos instead of the rest of my army, I'm very happy with that because the commandos actually output less damage than most other Republic units.
That's fair. Unless you're at range 2.
Yeah, I mean, even then, it's sort of like if we're at range 2, I don't need to recover. I can just shoot you. Um,
Yeah, that's fair.
so it's kind of like if we're at range 2, I've got access to the pool I need, and if we're not, I'm just going to recover, and you can keep shooting this unit that's like significantly less effective than other units. Like the commandos are just there to like basically be a pincushion until they get to 2 for the most part. Obviously, like the range 4 gun is a decent fire support starter, but I find I only probably shoot that once or twice a game, maybe with each commando unit.
Yeah, that's fair.
Anywho, I'm not trying to poo-poo on the suppressive
Yeah.
thing, but I have found that when my opponent has dished suppression into my commando units, I'm sitting there rubbing my hands together like, thank God they didn't shoot my P1s.
Yeah. I mean, suppressive also a good keyword against P1s, right?
Yes, 100%.
So I think there is a case to be made for Decas. I personally find it hard to fit them into, like, you basically have to drop the B2s, and I think I'd much rather have the B2s personally.
Yeah.
But there's a case for them. Uh, I will say if you're trying to run like 3 Decas, you need to practice a lot with positioning because they get in each other's way constantly.
Yeah, it's
It's a speed 1 ground unit that has 2 models in the unit. They do not have reposition. So um, it's just really hard to not run into situations where you're like, I want to move and oh, this other droidic is in my way. So yeah, they're tough to get around when you have 3 of them all at the same time.
yeah.
So practice if you're doing that. Yeah. I think those, and then there's the snail. I've seen people take the snail instead of like a third VX unit. I find that hard to justify, but I could see it, I guess.
The snail's pretty unkillable.
It's very
Is
unkillable.
the main
Yeah.
thing, Um,
You're kind of signing up to do the same thing that like a bus list is doing, where you're just taking a unit whose sole job is to just get in the way.
yeah.
Which has some merit to it, but that's more of an objective focused EXD list than an attrition focused EXD list.
Yeah, I think so too. I also think you could make the case that like you don't actually need 3BXs. Like 2 is often enough to do the damage that the list needs to do,
Yeah,
Um
they
so
carry a lot of weight.
yes, for sure.
Anyway, that's my EXD experience. So the tactics topic I wanted to talk about is basically infiltrating aggressively,
Sure.
because that's exactly what happened in my first game.
Yep.
I was playing against Mike Stubbs, and he was playing Clone Commandos with Rex. And we ended up on VAPS. I think I vetoed to VAPS. I don't remember exactly how we got there, but we ended up on VAPS. And there was, uh, we were on advanced positions, and there was like a sort of one of those like semicircle wall things
Mhm.
near my side of the board. So of course, because this is what you do, right? I put a VAP behind the semicircle wall thing. And
I know where this is headed.
yeah, I immediately regretted it. It was like an Anchorman when, Will Ferrell jumps down into the bear pit. He's like, I immediately regret this decision. He immediately deployed he was blue. So he immediately deployed a clone commando right on the opposite side of that curved wall. In a place, and it was in such a way that like if I wanted to shoot it, I would have had to totally completely expose whatever that unit was to, because I would have had to go all the way around the wall. I would have exposed it to A, that commando, but B, also like the rest of his army. That's kind of how the terrain was set up.
Yep.
And of course, there's two things I'm thinking here. The first is simply like, wow, that's a really annoying spot for commando that could just tap that VAP at any time.
Yep.
um, and two, uh, that's a really annoying spot for commando who are actually pretty good in melee, and my list does not want to be in melee, and I have to go to that spot to tap the VAP. So it was a very interesting, like from the first deployment, I'm like, well, this is going to be an interesting game. Um, Basically what happened is I kind of ignored that commando unit for the first like 3-ish turns, and I tried to basically just focus on attacking everything else that was moving to support it. I focused first on the phase of ones, and in a clone list that has no inherent defensive tech, whenever a BX commando unit shoots a phase one,
It
um,
dies.
yeah, I mean, I wasn't getting like full wipes, but it was like boom, 3 models dead, next shot, boom, squad is gone.
Yeah.
And he did have medics, so that helped a little bit. But the BXs did good work against the phase ones, and then it was basically just the commandos and Rex that were up there on the other side of that wall. And at some point, he had to like come out and do something, and we ended up in kind of like this weird melee scrum. Actually, I took a couple range 2 rad cannon shots on the commandos with with the B1s, and they killed some. And we ended up in a situation where I think he only had like one commando left and Rex. Um, he played Call Me Captain because the commando was in melee with several of my units.
Sure.
He also had a surviving phase one in melee with one of my units. He his first action was like in a combined commando attack and um and Call Me Captain fire support onto B1 unit. He left the
Mhm.
B1 unit on one model. It
Nice.
was basically like a bad roll combined with a surprising B1 save.
Sure.
Um, and then I one shot at Rex.
It's not hard to do. He's squishier than most core units.
Yeah, I think I had a BX unit down to 3 models, and he had cover,
Sure.
and I did the extra dice thing, and I still one shot at him.
Yeah.
Um, so and that was basically the game. But I think that strategy could have worked in that situation. And I do want to talk about like aggressive infiltrating and when it's appropriate to do that and when it's a bad idea. So
Sure.
thoughts?
I mean,
Initial thoughts from you as a commando player?
yeah, I definitely have employed a similar strategy um in matchups that it you kind of need a line of sight blocker. If there's not a line of sight blocker, it's fine, but I think you're better off kind of sitting on the range 4 config for the first couple turns if you're actually going to be trading shots. Um but and the other thing is like you need to be blue player because otherwise
Yes.
it doesn't really work. Um
Otherwise, you just get hedged out.
Yes, or your opponent needs to make a mistake with their deployment and like
Yeah.
deploy in the back of their deployment zone as opposed to like setting up the edging out your infiltrate bubble.
Right.
But players that know what they're doing are gonna understand that.
Yep.
So I guess let's take that off the table. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it's defensible, I think, but I'm not sure how. I think it depends on the list. I think it depends on. So if you're doing that, that means you're taking a unit out of the clone ball.
Yes. Generally.
Yeah, at least one, if not two. And basically every unit that is away from the clone ball means that your list is going to degrade or is going to work less cohesively. So I think that this kind of strategy is more inclined for the Rex lists or the Cody lists or the aggressive Yoda lists that are like not running Padme. Uh, but the issue that I've found with these lists pretty much universally at this point is that the second their offense flounders, you scrub a roll or whatever, they really don't have the solid defensive tech to back it up. And you just start losing units left, right, and center. Is what I've found. And when you're infiltrating a unit like that in a Republic list, you're kind of taking away you're shifting the center of gravity. You're kind of making it so that you're not winning tie breaks anymore because you sacrifice it. Like that unit is eventually going to die if your opponent wants it to die, right? Like,
Yep.
so you got to play the game differently. You can't rely on kind of like edging margins. You got to actually make sure that you're like killing your opponent's stuff, which means you got to get everything closer and into a situation where you would ordinarily not put your phone ball.
Yeah, and he ended up kind of spread out, to your point.
Yeah.
You know, his VAPs were a little further back, so he had to have at least a couple units back there to do the VAPs. And I was able to sort of engage like 2/3 of his army with all of mine in the initial turns. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. I will say Katarn armor is horribly frustrating.
Yes, it is.
Um,
I think the biggest maybe indicating factor on whether or not you should even attempt this is what deployment you're playing.
Yeah.
I think the closer the deployment, the more reasonable doing this it is.
because you can support them with the rest of your force more easily.
Exactly. Yeah. Hemmed in, even like major offensive when you're talking about like if you're like corner to corner, that's really only like I think like range 3 and some change, I think.
Yeah.
Um, we're talking about battle lines, danger close. Things where you can infiltrate them in a place that is incredibly frustrating, but the rest of your clone ball can kind of deploy naturally, like within range 2 of them. They can kind of like step up and cohere tokens into being. Is when I found that this is actually the most helpful.
Yep.
You can guidance a fire support unit up alongside them or something,
Yep. Mhm.
and it really kind of you need to be able to support them because like any other infiltrating unit, if you do that and you leave them, they will live longer than every other infiltrating unit in the game because Katarn is busted. But at the end of the day, Katarn is not going to carry you if that's the only thing that they're shooting all turn.
Right.
You
At some
know?
point, they're going to plow through it, or they're going to just kill one model at a time, and you're still going to be dead.
Yeah, eventually that's going to happen. And maybe their entire army shooting your clone commando for one turn is worth it, but generally in the turn 1 through 3 window, um it's not. Like you still can't afford to lose a unit as a Republic player early on in the game, right? Like that's not really a thing you can be doing. When we're flipping on the backside of the game and it's like turns like 4, 5, and 6, like if your opponent's just shooting your clone commandos, you're feeling pretty great.
Yeah. I do think this was sort of the perfect situation for it, in that he could put the unit in a place that could directly threaten an objective while simultaneously being sort of inaccessible to me without me like unnecessarily exposing something.
Yeah, that does sound basically like this. If now's the time, right?
Yeah, if
Get
there's
your
if there's a
warriors
time,
now.
yeah, if there's a
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
it's now. Yeah.
But I do think it's one of those things where you're gonna have to kind of like feel it out in the moment. It's not like you can't just do it every game
Right.
and
Yep.
and expect it to work.
Yep, for sure. All right. Well, that was my tournament. So yeah, I guess I ended up going 3-0. It was it was only 3 rounds. So there was Scott from the Capos, who ran Wookiees with Yoda, also went 3-0.
Yeah,
And
our
he
resident Kashyyyk Battle Force expert.
Yep. Yep. And he won the strength schedule, so he got first in the tournament. So congrats to Scott. But um how was you ran Bad Batch, right? How was your Bad Batch experience?
It was fun. Honestly, a little bit disappointing.
Okay, go on.
So first of all, I was definitely not running the best Bad Batch list. I was running a 7 activation list, and
Okay.
it was Kenobi, Padme, Bad Batch, like 1 clone commando and 3 phase ones with DC-15s and medics. It was
Yep.
basically my like Kenobi, Padme, clone commando list, but I took out the clone commander and a clone commando and stuck Bad Batch in.
Okay. Yep.
Which Bad Batch is an effective unit. They're very hard to kill. I think there are a couple things that uh, after playing with them, I'm not like super sold on how good they are.
Okay.
On paper, they obviously look insane. And the amount of stuff they have access to is insane, just so we're clear. But at the end of the day, they are only an ARC trooper unit at range 2, as far as like the maximum amount of damage that they can do. Uh, I-
Sure.
so
Their floor is significantly higher.
I'm actually, I mean, uh, hmm, I don't know how I feel about that statement because I didn't really feel that way.
Okay.
The reason for that is, um, Bad Batch obviously is leaning on just their own tokens for the most part,
Right.
right? Which means they have like between 1 and 3 aims, which is obviously a decent amount. Let's, for the sake of our argument, say that they've got 2,
Okay. Yep.
because that's like kind of median and reasonable.
Yep.
Which is 6 rerolls, right?
Yep.
It's not uncommon for my full arcs and my Yoda list to have access to 3 aim tokens.
Sure, but that's full arc supported by
It,
a 200 point unit.
no doubt. And I think that going back to it, like this was the problem with the list that I had created was that I had Bad Batch backed up by a 200-point unit, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Which is like, is that really necessary when Bad Batch's whole thing is doing everything by themselves?
well, so this is the issue that I sort of started running into is that they actually start sucking when you lose dudes.
Okay.
Like they um when you pay 160 points for a unit, basically any other unit in the game, with perhaps the exception of Dark Troopers, um, units that cost that much don't actually suffer offensive attrition
Generally. Yeah.
generally. And even the Dark Troopers are only losing like 1 die in the pool for each dude they lose, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Dark Troopers are very heavily backloaded.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whereas Bad Batch is like, I lost a dude. Um, I'm losing somewhere between 2 to 3 dice and several keywords, right? And all of there's like not a guy you can really kill. Let me just like pull them up so I'm not talking out my butt here. Like you can't kill Echo. He's got reliable, right?
Yep.
Um, Wrecker's got extra. He's got an extra red die on his attack pool. Like
Yep.
that's pretty good, right? Obviously, he's got the extra wound, so he's like the most likely to kill first. But that extra die is kind of a big deal. Tech gives you cash aim and dodge, and obviously, once the cash stuff is gone, he's less good. But tactical also very important to like making sure that the floor of that pool is up there.
Yep.
And then Crosshair, this was actually interesting because we had a Bad Batch like mirror game where one of us was playing Rebel Bad Batch and the other was playing Republic Bad Batch.
Uh-huh.
Precise one's a big deal.
Yep.
In the effectiveness of this unit. uh and so like you got to kill one of the 4 of them first, but all of them, as soon as they die, you're losing more than just the dice. You're either losing extra dice, you're losing your aim tokens, you're losing your surge tokens, or you're losing your rerolls and pierce. Like And so as soon as you lose one model, they go from being like a full arc unit to not a full arc unit all of a sudden. Look, they still have 11 health, very hard to kill.
Yep.
But like, if Anakin or Yoda or Kenobi, when they took 3 wounds, have their dice pool, you wouldn't take them.
Right.
um, so I'm not saying they're bad, but I am saying that that was significantly more impactful on their play experience than I had expected it to be. And I just want to stress, I was playing them with Kenobi Padme.
Which is like about as durable as they can possibly be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, my Bad Batch was dying significantly less than everybody else's Bad Batch is ever gonna die. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, uh I haven't come to a solid conclusion on that, but I guess what I am saying is that they might be less busted than I think they look like on paper. Oh, their command card is busted though, just so we're clear.
Yep.
I straight up just like used it in the one game to like we were playing VAPS and we were basically playing I'm sitting on my end of the board, you're sitting on your end of the board. We're in like a tiebreaker scenario. And I was just like, I'm tired of this. I play the Bad Batch 3-pip. I kill your guy babysitting your evaporator, and next turn I'm going to tap it. There's nothing you can do about it. So I think the way that we probably need to think about Bad Batch, at least how I'm going to be thinking about them moving forward, is that this is a unit that is like built as like a playmaker unit. It's not really there to kill things. I obviously it kills things as part of like what it does, but it doesn't really kill things any better than Republic already does. And I think you can take units that are much cheaper. Like you can almost get 2 full arc units for it. You can get a full arc unit in a phase 1 unit with a heavy for roughly the same cost, okay? Which is throwing 20 dice in a fire sport situation, right?
Yep.
Like, so like I think when we're talking about the offensive viability of Bad Batch, I do think like there was multiple times when I was like, I roll 9 Pierce 1 into you, and like you didn't kill the unit because you're shooting a red surgeon saves, and sometimes it's backed up by impervious, and it's just like when Bad Batch doesn't one shot a unit, it doesn't feel great, So I don't know.
Well, and if you compare them to other units at a similar price point, they're either heavy vehicles,
Yeah,
or if they're trooper units, they're characters that do significantly different other things to affect the game state besides just kill things and exist, right? Because that's at the end of the day, that's what Bad Batch does, right? They kill things and they exist to do objectives.
Yep.
If you compare them to like any force user, those force users have typically command cards that do often very crazy things. They have force powers, obviously, and then their dice pools tend to be extremely reliable and have high pierce values. So, yeah, I mean, I see it. I don't know. I guess it'll be an interesting experiment on how far can you take a unit that's just like an absolute piece of meat that is, very tough to kill, has a strong attack, and that's like it. Basically, that's what they do.
Yeah, and I also think, one of the other things that I've run into, not this weekend, but just kind of like play testing them out in like games at, on Thursdays, is that if you don't have a force push in the list, they're like pretty weak to melee.
Yep.
Which is why I was kind of hoping like, keeping them like in a move, shoot, move back to like the Kenobi Iron Dome situation would be good, because if somebody threatens them with a lightsaber or something, I can at least like, go with Kenobi, force push them out, and then like medic whatever the force user killed back, because he's probably only killing one model,
Right.
you know. But yeah, I don't know. Because it's a unit that begs to be played in a non-force user centric list, I think, because that's kind of what it seems to be trying to do. But not having force push in Republic is it's tough.
Yeah. I think probably where I want to try them is a list like that, where it's basically Bad Batch, a clone commander, Padme, 3 clone commandos, and then a bunch of phase ones with medics and heavy weapons, obviously. And that kind of just leans into the fact that they're just a pure like attacking slash meat shieldy type unit, and that's hopefully you're using them alongside your clone commandos to do something similar. Um, I don't know how that actually works in practice, but that is 9 active. You can get up to 9 activations with that list. Of course, you have Padme for secret mission, so that brings your scoring unit potential up to 10.
Padme does a lot of work for them. I will say, I don't know. Did you see the picture I posted in Discord?
Yeah, where Padme had like 15 suppression or something.
They were all on Bad Batch.
All of the
Basically,
suppression was.
pretty much.
Yeah.
That Bad Batch had just like soaked 2 turns of like range trooper shooting, and just like an Imperial, it was like a range 4, 3 range trooper, 2
uh,
death trooper, like, and they were just like sitting there, just like every time I'd lose a guy, I'd like just put him back with a medic, right? And he
yep.
also did the Annihilation Looms play, so I just like there was like his game plan was to panic Bad Batch, and it would have worked had
If
Padme not just been like, "This is all mine now," you know.
yeah,
Uh, so, uh, yeah, I don't know. But Padme does a lot for them in that they don't have a native 1-pip. The Republic generic 1-pip doesn't actually give them an order unless you've got a vehicle. Padme's 1-pip does, right? The 2-pip is very good for them in, getting, they're a very movement centric unit, like aggressive
yep.
negotiations, giving like a, speed 1 to get around a corner and into safety, big deal. Um, and frankly, they're pretty surge hungry because they want to be spending it on offense and defense. So that reliable token is big. Um, I have found myself just infiltrating, secret missioning Padme for that turn 1 dodge token more often,
Hmm.
because it turns the Kenobi Padme list from having 4 cards that give you dodge tokens at the top of the turn to 5.
Yeah. And secret mission is good too.
Secret mission was great, right? Particularly when all of a sudden you got like clone commandos and Bad Batch,
Yeah.
things that are shifting the narrative a little bit into you're moving your army around the board more,
Yep.
which is not a bad thing. But one thing, flipping the script here, I think Rebel Bad Batch is pretty terrible.
Okay. Is this go on? What are your reasons for thinking said
Uh,
that Bad Batch is
Crosshair is
good?
really good. Crosshair
Yeah.
is like the linchpin of what makes the Republic version work, I think. If it works, it's because Crosshair exists in it, I think. And like losing Precise, losing Pierce 1, and more importantly, I was finding like sometimes you just are like moving out of a line of sight blocker, taking a range 5 shot like into light down to none, and like Crosshair just picking up a dude, and you're moving back behind the line of sight blocker because you're just like not at the point of the game where you want to get spicy, right?
Uh-huh.
And Rebel Bad Batch just in those situations like literally does nothing.
Yep.
Um, so not to speak of all of the order problems with Rebel Bad Batch, but I just I
Which
was
is
very uninspired by the Rebel Bad Batch, just because like they're like 2 to 3 aim tokens is very different in the Republic one as opposed to the Rebel one. you're rolling one less die every time you spend a name token.
So here's something interesting that just now occurred to me. Uh, Rebel Bad Batch is a merc unit that does not have independent. I know that Ewoks are technically also in that boat, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Um, but it feels like, being a merc unit, generally speaking, with the obvious exception of Ewoks, it's kind of a cost benefit thing where not being able to give them an order still nets you something, right? Like if you
Yes.
look at all the other operatives that are mercs, they're bounty hunters generally,
Yep.
and all of those units have independent. So if you're not giving them an order, you're at least still getting something. For rebels, it's just like it's bad. Your focus unit doesn't have an order on it, and that's it. There's no upside.
I mean, they are the Bad Batch, so
Yeah, I think I'd feel a little bit better about it if rebel heroes had better access to allies of convenience, but generally speaking, most of the good rebel characters are ones that don't have command slots. I know there are
yeah.
some exceptions to that, but
And these days, like rebel officers are fewer and far between, right? Like we're kind of
yeah.
it turns out dodge tokens what the take cover one action outside of maybe giving Luke or Ahsoka like a dodge token. It's not what it used to be.
It's underwhelming. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah. I think Han is probably like the best commander that has a command slot in Rebels, but
hmm.
he doesn't like his cards aren't actually good at giving orders to other things.
Sure. Yeah, I was gonna
So
say I think the one that makes the most sense to probably take with them is Lando.
yes, I think Lando specifically makes more sense for Bad Batch.
Yeah.
But Lando is also not a character that you were taking like normally.
Sure, he's like 20 points too expensive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Which is kind of my point, right? Like amongst the rebel characters that were sort of already good, there's really only one, that being Han, that has a command slot, and his cards aren't great at giving other units orders anyway. So
yeah.
yeah, I don't know. That said, you could do a pretty amusing reckless diversion turn with Omega sticking her out there by herself and only taking one wound at a time on Bad Batch.
I mean, you
Uh,
don't shoot him at that point, right?
well, if it's
Oh,
reckless
you're saying
diversion,
you're saying giving them. I see. I
give
see.
them the face up
Give them
from
the
reckless
order.
diversion. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, maybe we'll have to try that.
Yeah. Maybe that's a use case for them. I don't know. But
Yeah.
all right. Well, it was super fun actually getting out to a local tournament. This was my first tournament since Worlds, so it was great to get out there, see everybody again. I'm looking forward to Nova Open, which will probably be my next one.
Yeah, and it's actually really not that far away. I think it's like are we under 60 days at this point?
No, it's the first weekend in September. It's Labor Day weekend, but we're very close to 60 days.
Okay. Yeah, we're close.
So
Yeah. Hopefully, I mean, it's very possible that EXT will not be a thing or be the meta will be different at that point if we get like new battle forces of mini extravaganza or something. And in fairness, like the battle forces are always pretty busted, so uh
yeah,
I feel like there's a good shot there. Good shot at that, right?
yeah, and who knows? We could get some crazy 2.0, 3.0, whatever it is these days, shakeup. So
Star
I
Wars
per
Legion Reloaded.
yeah, I personally think that stuff is more likely to come closer to when we're getting new core set resculpts, but who
Yeah, I
knows?
think I think we'll probably like if something like that's coming, they'll tell us that it's coming, but we won't be playing with it for another 6 to 8 months or something, right?
Yeah, they could surprise us. Who knows? Maybe they'll be like, "Hey, new print and play rules out next week. Here you go. Here's a new edition."
There's no way. There's no way. I wouldn't believe that for a heartbeat. The amount of milking they did the last time they
with
updated
with
the
with the
rules.
CRB. Yeah.
Yeah, they were like, yeah, we're gonna milk it for like an article every other week or whatever for like 2 months, and they weren't even like gigantic changes, but they were like, yeah, no, no, no. If they're gonna do something like that, they're gonna milk it for 4 to 5 months. I would be
Probably.
very, very surprised if they did.
Yeah, probably.
So
All right. Well, then I'm probably playing EXD at Nova Open. Or maybe Clone Commando's Bad Batch. I do need to try that 9 activation list for science, but I also
yeah,
want
I
an
mean,
excuse to paint Bad Batch because they look super fun to paint.
oh,
So
they're I mean, painting Delta Squad was like the funnest Republic painting thing that I've maybe done ever at this point. Like, just because it was like, oh, you're painting things that are more than just the color of their armor. Um,
yep.
so yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I think it's time to give in and do the thing. So
What is I can't tell which sprue you're holding up there.
yes, you can look harder.
Oh, Wookiees. Yeah, okay. This took me a second.
Is it really that hard to tell? No, there's some pretty
It
clear.
took me a second, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah. I've got all the boxes and I've got multiple Fluttercraft, and that'll probably be my next hobby project after I'm done putting together, well, painting my War Machine, Sam Wilson and Spider-Man. So
Okay, cool.
yeah. So,
All right. Well, we are the Notorious Scoundrels of Cal.
and I'm Mike.
Stay fresh, cheese bags.